So I decided I'll do a quick screen recording for you. I don't know if it's going to help, but I just wanted to share how I edit, and it might save you time. I know it saved me a ton of time and made things a lot quicker and a lot more consistent for me. So I use Lightroom, Photoshop, and a Photoshop plugin called Kaotec. I don't know if I've mentioned that or not, but it's been an incredible help to me. So I'm just going to go over, this is a little condo I just shot this morning, and it's not super special or anything, but it's a great starter to show you basic stuff. So I've already done all of the basic pre-edits on this. I'm just going to reset this layer, and I'm going to reset this layer and these two frames. So this was my original ambient shot. Window's blown out a little bit, but mostly I'm making sure that I've got some detail there, and I've got enough detail up here where it's not just completely washed out. The color's a little warm. I did run manual color balance with Kelvin, so I got this as close as I could in camera, but it's close. This is the flash shot. Color's a little cool, but I can warm it up if I want. So what I do, after I shoot all these, I import the raws, and I have a preset called import, and I can apply it on import, but I usually don't because I've got a different preset for the exterior shots. So for all the interior shots, I hit the import. What that does, pulls my highlights down, because I do shoot a little brighter around the windows, but it'll pull my highlights down, bump the shadows up, pop the whites up and pull the blacks down for contrast, brings the clarity up a little bit for contrast, and then brings up the saturation a hair. And then I do sharpen on this layer, so everything is nice and crisp. And then I apply the lens correction and chromatic aberration removal. Basically, that's all that the import does. Nothing super fancy, just kind of evens everything out. So you can see it just opens up some of the shadows and fixes that. So that's applied to the ambient layer. Now I'll apply the import to the flash layer as well, and it does very similar. So after I've done that to all of these, I'm going to go back and I'm just going to go through each one and just kind of touch up the white balance, cool it off just a little bit there, maybe warm that up just a tad there, so that they match. Like, they're fairly close. Let me see. There we go, that and that. If I have to like manually blend in some of the ambient later, they're going to be fairly close and they'll match good. So after I apply the import, I go through on each one, I make sure white balance is right. Sometimes I'll add just a little bit of a dehaze, or like this one I had to, my flash shot, the exposure was too bright. So I'll just bring that down a little bit so that I have the color in the walls and everything else that I'm looking for. And again, the flash is just for the color. Most rooms, I get away with shooting one ambient and one flash. Then if I get to like a complicated space where I wanted to show kind of the flow, this is my ambient shot. And on this one, if I reset, it's super yellow and orange in there and kind of blue out here. So I applied the import, and then I go down and I just desaturate some of the orange and the yellow. There's still a little bit there, but not enough to really throw anything off. And then I go through each of the flash shots. I've got one flash to light and color most of this main area here, and I've got another one for that room, got another one for that side, and got one for the kitchen. So I've got proper color in each of these areas. So I've gone through and I've done all of that, and then I export all of the interior photos to a folder called Kaotec, and they all come out here. I don't put them in these folders yet. Once they're all exported here, I just do full res JPEGs. I don't resize, I don't bring the quality down. They're just JPEGs, but full res. Then I go through and I sort them into every image, final image that has two shots. I sort them all into the folder called number 2. Same with 3, 4. Looks like I don't have any with 4, so I can delete that. I do have 5, and I didn't have any 6 in this one. Sometimes I'll have 6 frames to make up a shot. So now I've got my Kaotec folder here with 2, 3, and 5. Then I'll close out Lightroom, You don't have to close it. I just do because I only have 16 gigs of RAM on my system, so I want this to run fast in Photoshop. And window extensions, Kaotec Retoucher Plus 5. I've got it over here. So I go to Batch Tools, Merge Processor, and you can check these, but they don't always work very well for me. So I just go to Start Batch, find my client that I just shot for today, go to his folder, go to Kaotec, and then all I do is click the Kaotec folder, and then it automatically goes through each one of these. You hit open, and then you can watch it automatically go through and merge every one of my images. The initial import and going through every frame and making sure exposure and white balance are right, that might take 15-20 minutes, depending on how big your house is, maybe 30 minutes. This merging takes 2 or 3, not very long. And if you've shot right, and if you've got your white balance and everything, like the minor touch-ups that I was doing earlier, if you've got all that right, when this is done, every image is like 90% there. Some of them I don't even have to do anything else. I can just be done and export them the way they are. But I always like to put extra touches on my work. I'm just kind of picky, and I like a lot more ambient lighting in the shot, so I'll show you what I do once I get all of these merged and processed. Anything I can batch merge or batch do, I love it. And I'll just let this run so you can see how long, I forget how many images it is, but I'll show you at the end when I'm done. But you can see how long it takes to batch merge these. And I'm trying to remember the, okay, there we go. Okay. So that throws a little error sometimes, it doesn't mean anything. So after it batch merges them all, that was quick, it throws them in a folder called merged. And now you have PSD files for every image. So we're going to select all of them. I've got 25 interior images. I'm going to right click, open with Photoshop, and open them all back up again so that I can start brushing in some of the layers and get them looking just the way I want them to look. Wait for them all to open. Okay, that was my last screen. So, this is pretty much good enough where I don't feel like I have to do anything to it. It looks like a decent shot. But Like I said, I usually touch up just a little bit, so after it merges, this background layer is what I'm seeing here. And then there's the flash and the ambient. The ambient's always on top because of the, I always shoot my ambient first and then I shoot my flash frame, so I know when I merge, I always have the ambient layer on top. So I'm going to go to the flash layer, and I use the flash to bring in the color that I want, the natural color. So I'm going to paint in that light a little bit, some of that up there, the blue there, darken up and make sure that these are all white balanced correctly. And then if I want to brush it a little bit on the wall and those bins up there just to make sure. Then I'll go to my ambient layer and go back up to my Kaotec plugin, go to Expo Blend, and these are all tools in here for exposure blending, which is just blending these down here. I'll change this to a luminosity layer. You can also just go to your modes here and change it to luminosity at the bottom. I just like using this Kaotec tool because one, it renames it luminosity, and it's all ready to go there. So then I can just start kind of brushing in and get the natural shadow, the natural light, and I like that a bit better. And I avoid painting around the light just so I keep the light details from the flash shot. And then I Control S to save, or Command S if you're on Mac, and close that shot, and then move on to the next. And again, just kind of brush in where I want color, detail from the flash, more on the lights up there, and then go to my ambient, change it to luminosity, and then brush in, and make sure you bring in the shadows. A lot of people blow out the shadows because they think, oh, everything needs to be super, super bright. I guess it depends on your style, but having the shadows that are actually there makes it look a lot more natural. Save that, and close it. Again, I want the proper color from the flash, but I want the actual light look from the light that was in the closet. Brush that in. I'm using a Wacom tablet. If you hear the little kind of scratchy going on. Save that, and close. Sometimes I don't even have to use the flash. I just do it to make sure I've got proper color there. On that wall, it looked a little washed out. Because when it blends these, it doesn't change this to luminosity before it blends, it just blends the actual normal mode on it. So I do think that painting in some of the flash really helps with the color and contrast of things sometimes. I'll bring the luminosity in. And I'm not going to paint too much in over here because it's already super bright. I'm actually going to take just a hair out. And take a hair out on this wall just to even it out. And then sometimes on darker shots like this, it's super dark, I've got a tool up here, an action, that Sean Grizzle sent me. It's magic though, and if you're interested I would reach out to him to get it. But I click the action, hit play, brings up a brush, and it basically acts like my flash, and I don't know how it does it, but it keeps accurate color, keeps accurate everything, but it just acts like my flash was filling in some of those shadows a little better. And there we go. I still left the shadows. I don't wash all the shadows out, but that did need brightened up a little bit. And it ends up being like a digifill layer over here. I just say digifill because that's what it's called, but, and I'll save that. I want a little more detail out the window, so I paint that in with the flash. Wash that out a little bit. Darken that side, because that's what the actual light looked like. And I'm good with that. Now, on this one, I have this one really dark layer because I wanted to make sure I get all the details to show outside really well there. But I don't want that for in here because it just darkened everything up. So what I'll do, I'll unlock all the layers, delete the background, delete the masks from all of these, hide this one layer, and I'll brush it in later, but I just hide it. And then I go up to Magic Merge, and it does the exact same process, it just doesn't use that one layer. So inside looks really good. And then I'll use this layer to paint in the outside once I'm happy with everything in here. So I'm just gonna paint a little flash in. Make sure I'm good with that. Now I'm gonna go to my luminosity layer. Bring that in. Bring these shadows back in to make it look natural. The shadows are really what makes things look natural. And making sure you don't have shadows from the flash itself. Put that in. I'm going to get rid of a little on the carpet just to bring in some detail there. And then this layer I'm going to bring up to the top. And I just want to paint in out the windows a little bit. And then make my brush a little smaller and just kind of clean up the edges. Normally I'm a bit more careful, and a lot of times I'll do a window pull, which I just did not do on this. I figured it was hazy enough that it's going to blend pretty well, and I don't need a lot of it. I don't need the layer to be full on visible, so I just wanted to paint a little bit in there to get some color. On the outside. And when I'm painting, if you hit X, it's a shortcut to change if you're painting black or white on the layer. So I've got that pretty good, and then I'm just going to bring the opacity down. Looks good. Looks pretty natural. Make sure I don't have any extra up there. I'm actually going to make it a little less there. And then I still have my arm and stuff from the window flash reflection there. So if you go Command Option or Control Alt Shift E, that creates a new layer with all of this information in that layer. And then I'll zoom in, select my lasso tool, and just select my outline. There, right click, fill, content aware, and hit OK. And there we go. Looks good as new. Nobody knows the difference. Again, this is a little washed out, so I'm going to paint the flash color back in the walls and the wood, especially the wood. Sometimes the wood gets washed out. And then use my luminosity again, find the shadows and the highlights there and kind of darken those. Now here, especially on wood cabinets and kitchens, I find that I've got to do two flash shots. The first one always has a harsh reflection on the wood somewhere, but over here, it's all good. And then this one has the harsh reflection over here, so I just stood on this side of the camera, and then I stood on the other side so that I have good content to blend in. So this one, I'm just going to blend that wood in over there. That layer, I'm going to blend that wood in over there, so it gets rid of all the flashy highlight stuff, and it looks like a good natural wood. And then I'll go to my luminosity layer and blend that in. This also gets rid of a lot of the flash shadow under the cabinets. And you can see it's a little orange under there from the flash shadow, and I'll get rid of that in just a second. So I don't like how bright this is here, so I'm just going to erase a little bit of the luminosity from the wood there so it looks a little more natural. And I know the luminosity is like naturally there, but Now if you Command or Control J, that duplicates the layer. Take the bottom one, delete the layer mask, change the mode to normal, add a layer mask again, and then I can go in and just brush out under the counter here to get rid of that yellow. And I've white balance, matched the layers pretty well, so that it all looks good. And then if you have places in the wood where it looks a little dull, like it's not saturated, use this luminosity layer, or this normal layer, to brush in color back into the wood there as well. Again, I don't want to do too much up here, but there was a couple stripes of wood over there I saw didn't have color. Down here could use a little more natural color. There we go. Pretty happy with that. Now I'll take these back into Lightroom when I'm done and do like a dehaze a little bit, and that'll bring some of that color back in as well, some of the contrast. And paint in some of the flash. And this one, that wasn't too harsh over here, so I didn't worry about doing a second flash. Around windows, I like to make sure and get that reflection on the cabinets. That's what it looks like in real life. And then to make it look natural, I just paint in the window just a little bit to give it a little bit of a haze. Because you never see out of a window completely clear. But I like to show, okay, there's a little bit of blue sky that you can see there. There's a little bit of a green tree, and it looks natural. Again here I did 2 flash shots, one there and one there. So this one, I'm going to paint in some of the deeper color over on this side. This one I'm going to paint in some of the color over there. And we have a nice even cabinetry there. Change that to luminosity and then paint that in again. Now on the luminosity, again, I'm going to erase just a little bit on the wood there, and I'm going to erase a little bit on this side just to even that out. That looks good. Normally I'll have lights off so I don't deal with like the light cast, but this kitchen was super dark and I did want to bring in some of the ambient light from that, so I did have this kitchen light on. Normally I don't if there's enough window light to make it look natural. Now if you notice, these cabinets down here at the end are a bit gray. I'll use more of the ambient. I'll duplicate my ambient layer and help fix that again as well. I always like to make sure the windows are bright enough where it's very obviously the light source for all the shadows and everything. Okay, I'm going to erase a little ambient up here. It's just a hot spot. I'm going to erase a little bit. Nope, I'll leave that ambient. So I'm going to duplicate my ambient layer, change it to normal so it's not just ambient light, it's the color. And never mind, it doesn't bring very much color in down there at all. I must have desaturated some of the orange and stuff. Let me see if that helps. Yeah, it helps a little bit up on this side. And I'll call that good. This one again is the overall frame is dark because I've got this one shot where I just lit that room. So again, unlock the layers, delete the layer masks, hide the one layer that makes everything dark, magic merge that, and then I'll blend in. So when you have multiple rooms, or when I have multiple rooms, I'll take the one room I want to blend in, change that to lighten mode, and then I don't have to worry about whether I'm painting over here or not, because it's only going to paint in what the flash lit, and keeps it super clean. And make sure it's on top of your other layer. If it's underneath, if it's on top, I can still paint in this layer without obstructing that. But if it was the other way around, if I start painting in this layer, it'd start making that dark, if that makes any sense. And paint in my ambient light. Get rid of a little bit on that light to keep it crisp. Make sure I get these shadows painted in. And there we go. And if you use the bracket keys on the top right of your keyboard, that makes the brush larger or smaller. Paint a little flash around the lights to keep them crisp. Now, you were talking about trying to figure out where to pop flashes and stuff. This is a great example here. So, first, I want this main frame to be lit properly. So I'm just going to re-merge without that one layer right there. Hide that, delete the background layer, and magic merge. There we go, that looks a lot better. And I'll blend all of this in first. So if you shift click the mask, it hides everything else and just shows you that one layer. So I shot this flash to light this wall over here. And I shot this flash to light that wall over there, so I can paint myself out of both of these. So I'll use this one and paint myself out of that. And then I'll use this one, paint myself out of that. And then I'll use this shot to open up everything that I flashed on one of my first ones to get the proper color in the near field stuff here. Just gonna paint a little more there. I'm not too worried about the dark whatever. I'm gonna paint in the ambient light that's gonna fix all of that. And then this one shot down here is the kitchen, so I'm gonna pop that up to the top, change it to lighten, and paint the kitchen light in. That I flashed in the kitchen to get the proper light there. Now I have my luminosity layer. Instead of painting it in, I could just erase the mask and then leave the opacity at 0 and then paint out specific parts I didn't want, but that usually takes more time than it does just to paint it in here. And I end up with a very bright, very natural looking, great shot. This is all a little bright here, and I'll fix this in Lightroom again because I do take all these back into Lightroom. So I'm actually going to hide all those and magic merge just 2 layers. Gets everything overall looking good. That and that. I want to paint in this layer over there to get better color. I'm going to paint in this layer over here to get better color. And then I'll take this kitchen shot, pull it up, change the mode to lighten, and just paint that in. Overall, that looks really good. Then I'll blend in my ambient. Especially on furniture where you get all the shadows and stuff. I like to make sure that that gets painted in good. And the ceiling. Now, not too much around the skylight, just because I want to keep the edges crisp if I can. So I'll take my flash shot and paint in a little more around the skylight. And then I'll erase a little bit of the ambient around the skylight, and that way it keeps the edges nice and crisp. This shot's pretty much good. Paint in a little more color on the wood and the pictures up there. Darken that a little bit. And then make sure it's all natural light. And then I'll brighten up the window just a hair with the ambient. Keep it looking natural. Get some of that reflection in there. And we're good. Now what I can do, because this is a little bit dark up here, I can bring in the digital fill flash again and just paint a little bit of that in to open up the ceiling. I can do it here, or you can just do it in Lightroom with painting shadows in, or using a oval mask that just pops the shadows up. But if it's obvious, I like to do it here just because I'm here already and get that step done. A little bit, and then on the TV I'm going to erase a little bit just to keep the TV dark. Keeps it looking a little cleaner. There's also a TV tool. This one's not bad. Normally I wouldn't touch this TV, but if you close out that menu and go to manipulation and miscellaneous tools, there's a TV screen. So before you use that, zoom in on the TV. Get your lasso, and I do the polygonal lasso just to keep it nice, clean edges. Select the TV, everything inside the borders, just the screen part, and then hit TV screen. It automatically cleans it up and looks like that. It's a little too fake and too clean, so I always bring the opacity down just a hair to bring in some of the natural reflections. Maybe I've got to select that layer. There we go. There we go. You got a little bit of the natural reflections, but that keeps it nice and clean. So that versus that. I don't normally do it for low-end homes like this. It just takes extra time that I don't have to spend. But if I'm doing like nicer, big homes, I'll always do that. Just keep everything clean. I like Kaotec because it's got that feature. It also has sky replace. It also has fire. Like if there's a fireplace, I can add in fires that look really natural and good. It just has like all the tools pretty much that I need. I can do batch sky replacement, which is insane and works really well considering it's a batch process. And again, it does the kind of the same thing that this does. It creates a bunch of PSD files that I can go in and like make sure that the sky replace worked, and then brush in places or brush out places. Like if it's a white house, sometimes it mistakes it for the sky, and I can just brush it off the house. Go. I'll bring this layer up, that layer up, change the mode to lighten on both of those, and then I can paint that in over there. This one I can take there. This one I can get the color right here. And this one is just for this main room. So for that light and the floor. And then I use my ambient to get everything looking natural. And if there's a little bit I don't want here, it's too bright, I'll just knock out some of the ambient there. A little bit of that there. And happy with that. I'm going to throw in some digital fill flash over here just to even out the picture. A little bit up there and a little bit in the ceiling up there. And I'm happy with that. And paint in the flash to get the color right. And then ambient just to get all the light right. I don't want to paint on the blinds too much, just keep some detail there. Paint at the bottom to get rid of some of those shadows from the flash. Bring in some of the shadows over on this side of the bed. Gives us some depth. This shot's pretty good. Just on the color places that I'm concerned about, and then bring in that light again. And I'm going to cut out some of the ambient from there to balance it. Bring in the shadow a little bit again there, and that looks really good. This shot's super good. Bring in a little more color. Bring in a little more ambient. Get rid of the flash shadows on the lamp. And get rid of a little bit of ambient on the highlights there and a little bit over here. Now that lamp is a little yellow under there, so again I'll duplicate my luminosity layer. Change it to normal. Mask it. And then just paint in a little bit under there to get rid of the color. And again, since I matched initially the flash and the ambient, it blends in really well. Bring in the color on the floor. A lot of times if there's reflections from the window, it loses all the color, so I use the flash to bring that back in. Bring in a little window detail. And a lot of guys paint with like their masking, their flow at like 20% and their opacity at 20 or 30%. I do big strokes because I like most of it ambient, so I just leave it up at like 50 or 60. Like bring out a little ambient there so it doesn't blow out the ceiling. Bring in a little more ambient at the bottom of those to hide the flash shadows. And I like how that looks. Okay, that was our last one. We can close Photoshop now. Go back into Lightroom and import the photo and batch export. Go down to my merged folder. Those all look really good. And already, without doing any other final touches, these look really even and natural. And I'll start by, for the final touches, I'll bring the highlights down again a little bit, bring the shadows up a little bit. And if you hold Option or Alt while you move the white slider, you can see when the whites start blowing out. So I take it just to the edge there, and then the same with the blacks. Bring the blacks in so I start getting good solid contrast on that. That's good. Then I come down here again, I'll pull highlights down a little bit and just move the lights up. And it really brightens everything without losing highlight detail. Pull the highlights down a little bit. And I still have good shadow to give contrast, but the whole image is just a bit brighter. And those are the things that I'll do for final touches. Select all and sync. I don't sync white balance, local adjustments, transform, or crop. Everything else though, I synchronize. And it works for all those. So now I'll go through and check each one, and then I can do like minor adjustments if I want to dehaze to bring in some of the contrast in the doors and the color there. This shot I can warm up a hair to match that one better. That one I can warm up a hair and bring the highlights down a bit and bring the exposure up just a little, just to match the other shots better. I'll leave the exposure. It does feel a little, if I look at the thumbnail over here, it feels a little dark overall. So I'll just come down to my sliders here and bring the lights up a bit. And that just kind of brightens everything up. This looks good. Warm it up just a hair. Looks good. Looks good. I can warm that up a hair. And I'm going to go shadows. Brings my shadows up. And just kind of open the ceiling up and then move the whites up a tad bit there. Doesn't do a lot, but it helps a little bit. Use that same on this part of the ceiling just to brighten that. Again, I'll do that on the ceiling there. I'm going to dehaze this a little bit. That helps with the wood contrast. Bring in a little tint and cool that off just a hair. And add a little more contrast. I'm going to play with the darks now and see like how much that helps. I don't want to lift it up too much, but just enough. And I like that, so I'm going to sync all the kitchen shots that look just like that. Then I'll use the shadows and open up that a little bit. Shadows, open that up. I'm actually going to cool this a little bit. I'm going to warm the master up a little bit just to give it some depth. Now it feels too bright to me, so I'm going to bring some of the darks down, which will just increase the shadows and give it a little more depth. Warm that up a little bit. Warm that up a little bit. Pull up some of the ceiling shadow. Warm that up a hair. And then open up some of the shadows there. And I'm actually going to do a highlight oval where it pulls the highlights on the sink down a little bit, just to even the shot out. I can warm that up a bit, dehaze this bathroom a little. Use the shadows and open up that end. Bump the exposure just a hair. And then dehaze this. And let's bring some of the darks down again, just to give that some contrast. There we go. And warm this up just a hair. Since there's a lot of dark objects, I'm going to bring the shadows down a bit just to give that depth again. Dehaze this a little. And this corner's pretty dark, so I'm going to open up the shadows there. And that evens the shot out. Open that a little. I'll use this to open some of the shadows. Not too much, I just want to play with it and get it just right. And then I'm going to do a new one and kind of dehaze this other side. And that'll even the whole thing out. Dehaze this. And these cabinets are super yellow-orange since I use a flash. Sometimes it oversaturates those, so I'm just going to desaturate a little yellow and a little orange to keep them looking natural. And pull the highlights down. I'm going to pull the exposure down just a hair. And this one, they're actually super orange too. Just desaturate those a little bit, again, keeping it looking natural. Bedroom, we can dehaze, warm up, and play with the lights and darks. That looks better. This is good overall. Warm it up a little bit. And if I bring the lights up, and just brighten the entire house. Pull the darks down a little bit. Not too much, but I want to make sure the wood looks natural, not too bright. Warm that up. I'm gonna pull the highlights down a little bit. This is super highlighty, so I'm going to use a oval here to drop some of the highlights on the couch. And maybe an exposure a little bit. And I know that's from the skylight, so that is natural, but it just doesn't make the image look even and solid when you look at the thumbnail. I always reference everything by the thumbnail. Warm that up a little bit, dehaze a little bit, and play with the lights, bring them up and play with the darks and bring them down a little. And we'll bring these shadows up right in there without hitting the beam too much. And there we go. I've done all those minor touches there. Now I'm going to go down to my transform to make sure everything is straight. This is the 1 point, so I'll do a full, and it looks like I nailed that one. Vertical. Sometimes, usually these buttons work, but other times I'll just draw it if I don't feel like it actually got the verticals right. And if I shot straight on there, I'm going to hit full, and that keeps these level as well. This shot feels a little dark. I'm just going to brighten that a little bit and actually warm it up a little bit. And not too worried about the closet. There's not much you can get a vertical off of. This feels a little hazy to me. Gonna dehaze just a tad. Bring some of that contrast back in, and then this up here is still pretty dark, so I'm just gonna pop the exposure up a bit there. Comparing these two shots, this one feels a little cool. So again, I'm just going to warm that up a tad. That one feels a little cool. Full shot. And again, the oranges are super bright there. I forgot to hit those. So I'll just desaturate a little bit, not too much. Just enough to make it feel natural. Again, that's a 1 point, so I hit full, and then I'll check my horizontals to make sure that this line up here is level and this line is level. And that looks pretty good. Again with the orange. I hate these kind of cabinets. It almost always gets super bright. And something else you can do, you can play with the luminance, because sometimes these feel super, super bright. You just pull the orange and the yellow down a little bit, and it darkens those up. And then I want this corner over here to be a little brighter. And I think I can just bring up the overall exposure a little now. That matches a little better. Again, it's a 1 point, so I'll hit full. And I can warm this living room up a little bit. I can brighten it up a little bit. That's a 1 point. Again, I can warm it up a little more and brighten it up a little more. There we go. Vertical. And warm and bright. It's too much highlights down here. Just gonna do that and bring exposure down and dehaze just a little bit, just to give it some contrast on there. This shot could be a little warmer. And a little brighter, why not? There we go. Okay, these all look good. So then I'll batch export. And put these all in my finals folder, which I already did the exteriors. Quality I leave at 90%. I resize to 1500 pixels on the long edge, and I sharpen for screen. And I export. And that's my editing process.